The blood on her dress had dried to a rust-brown stain that no amount of scrubbing in cold creek water could remove, and Hannah Sutton knew that anyone who looked at her would see a woman marked by violence. She stumbled into Val Verde, Texas on a scorching afternoon in July of 1878, her boots worn through at the soles, her dark hair matted with dust and sweat, and her green eyes haunted by memories she could not outrun. The town sprawled along the dusty banks where civilization tried to take root in unforgiving soil, a collection of wooden structures that promised shelter but rarely safety. She had been walking for 3 days since fleeing the mining camp where her father had died in a collapse, where the foreman had decided that a young woman alone was easy prey, where she had fought him off with a broken bottle and run before anyone could decide whether to believe her story or his. The church stood at the edge of town, a simple white structure with a crooked cross nailed above the door, and something in Hannah's chest loosened when she saw it. Churches had become her sanctuary over the past month of running. They were the only places where men hesitated to follow, where locked doors meant something sacred, where she could curl up in a back pew and sleep without one eye open. She had slept in 7 churches across 3 territories, and each one had felt like a brief reprieve from the world that wanted to devour young women who traveled alone. The door opened with a creak that seemed too loud in the afternoon stillness. Inside, the air was cooler, scented with old wood and candle wax. Sunlight filtered through windows that had been cleaned recently, casting golden rectangles across simple wooden pews. Hannah's legs nearly gave out as she walked down the center aisle. She had not eaten since yesterday morning, had not slept more than a few fitful hours and days. Her body was shutting down, demanding rest that her mind had refused to grant. She chose a pew near the back, far from the door, but close enough to see if anyone entered. The wood was hard against her spine as she settled into the corner, drawing her knees up and wrapping her arms around them, her eyes closed despite her best efforts to stay alert. The church felt safe in a way that nothing else did anymore. Sacred ground, holy space. Surely God would protect her here, even if he had not protected her anywhere else. Sleep claimed her like a tide, pulling her under into darkness. She woke to the sound of footsteps and jerked upright, her heart hammering against her ribs. The light had changed, golden afternoon giving way to the orange-red of approaching evening. A man stood in the aisle about 10 feet away, and Hannah's first instinct was to run, but something made her pause. He had stopped moving when she woke, his hands held slightly away from his body in a gesture that was clearly meant to show he posed no threat. "Easy," he said, his voice low and rough like stones tumbling in a river. "I am not going to hurt you." He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that strained against a dusty work shirt. His hair was dark brown, almost black, and curled slightly at the ends where it brushed his collar. His face was tanned and weathered, marked by a life lived outdoors, with a strong jaw shadowed by a few days of stubble. But it was his eyes that caught Hannah's attention. They were a striking blue-gray, the color of storm clouds over the desert, and they looked at her with something that might have been concern rather than hunger. "You are bleeding," he said, nodding toward her feet. Hannah looked down and saw that he was right. Her worn-through boots had finally given up entirely, and the long walk had opened blisters that had bled through her thin stockings. She had been too tired to notice the pain. "I am fine," she said, though her voice came out thin and unconvincing. The man's mouth twitched slightly. "You do not look fine. You look half dead." He paused, seeming to consider his words. "When is the last time you ate?" Hannah did not answer. She did not know this man, did not know if his concern was genuine or just another trap. Men had seemed kind before, right up until they were not. "My name is Daniel Ashford," the man said. "I own a ranch about 5 miles north of town. I came to speak with Pastor Williams about a service for one of my ranch hands who passed. I did not expect to find anyone here." "I will leave," Hannah said quickly, starting to stand despite the way her head swam. "That is not what I meant." Daniel's voice was firm but not harsh. You can stay here as long as you need, but it is going to be dark soon, and I do not think you have anywhere else to go." The kindness in his words was almost worse than cruelty would have been. Hannah felt tears burn behind her eyes and blinked them back furiously. She would not cry in front of this stranger. "I sleep in churches," she heard herself say. "They feel safe." Daniel was quiet for a long moment, and Hannah watched him process this information. She saw something shift in his expression, a deepening of that concern into something that looked almost like understanding. "Safe from what?" he asked gently. Hannah laughed, and it came out bitter. "From men who think a woman alone is an invitation. From people who ask too many questions. From a world that does not care if I live or die." She had not meant to say so much, had not meant to reveal anything at all, but exhaustion and hunger had stripped away her defenses, and the words spilled out before she could stop them. Daniel nodded slowly as if she had confirmed something he had already suspected. "My home will feel safer," he said. Hannah's head snapped up, her body tensing for flight. "I am not going anywhere with you." "I understand why you would say that." Daniel took a careful step back, increasing the distance between them. "But hear me out. I have a ranch house with a housekeeper named Mrs. Chen, who has been with me for 5 years. She is a widow from California, tougher than boot leather, and she does not tolerate any nonsense. You would have your own room with a door that locks from the inside. You would have food, clean clothes, and a chance to rest without looking over your shoulder. And when you are ready to move on, I will give you enough money to get wherever you are going." "Why would you do that?" Hannah's voice was sharp with suspicion. "You do not know me. You do not owe me anything." "Because you look like you need help, and I am in a position to give it." Daniel's eyes held hers steadily. "I know what it is like to have nowhere safe to go. I was not much older than you when I found myself alone in a town that did not want me. Someone helped me then. I am just passing that forward." Hannah wanted to refuse. Every instinct she had developed over the past month screamed at her not to trust this man, not to put herself in a vulnerable position. But the alternative was another night on a hard pew, another day without food, another week of running on empty until her body simply gave out. "I have a gun," she lied. Daniel's mouth quirked into something that was not quite a smile. "Good. A woman traveling alone should be armed." He clearly did not believe her, but he did not call her out on the lie. "Mrs. Chen will be preparing supper in about an hour. There is always too much food because she insists on cooking for an army. You would be doing us a favor by helping eat it." Hannah studied his face, looking for any sign of deception, any hint of the predatory gleam she had learned to recognize. But she saw only patience and what seemed like genuine concern. She was probably being foolish. She was probably walking into danger. But she was so tired of being afraid, so tired of running, so tired of everything. "One night," she said finally. "I will stay one night and then I'm leaving." "Fair enough," Daniel said. "Can you walk? Or should I bring the wagon around?" Hannah's pride wanted her to say she could walk, but her feet were screaming in protest, and 5 miles might as well have been 50 in her current state. "The wagon," she admitted quietly. Daniel nodded and turned toward the door. He paused before leaving, looking back at her. "I'm going to be about 10 minutes. The door locks from the inside if you want to bolt it until I return. I will knock 3 times so you know it is me." Then he was gone, and Hannah was alone in the church again. She sat very still, her mind racing through possibilities and consequences. This could be a terrible mistake. This could be the end of her. But somehow the church that had felt so safe minutes ago now felt like a cage. She had been living in fear for so long that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to hope that things could be different. The 3 knocks came exactly when Daniel had said they would. Hannah opened the door to find him standing beside a sturdy wagon pulled by 2 horses. He did not try to help her up, seeming to understand that she needed to maintain whatever independence she could. She climbed into the seat beside him, acutely aware of how close they were sitting, How vulnerable she was out here in the open. The ride north was quiet at first. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that seemed too beautiful for a world so harsh. The landscape was dry and brown, dotted with mesquite and prickly pear, stretching endlessly toward distant purple mountains. Hannah had never been to this part of Texas before. She had been born in Colorado, had spent most of her life in mining camps that all looked the same, places where the earth was torn open and men grew hard as the rock they chased. "How old are you?" Daniel asked, breaking the silence. 21, Hannah said. "You?" 26. He glanced at her briefly before returning his attention to the road. "You said you sleep in churches. How long have you been traveling?" Hannah hesitated, then decided there was no harm in partial truth. "About a month. Maybe a little more. The days all run together." "Where are you trying to go?" "Anywhere that is not where I've been." Daniel nodded as if this made perfect sense. "Running from something specific or just running? Does it matter?" "Not to me," he said. "Everyone has their reasons. I'm not going to pry." They fell silent again, and Hannah found herself relaxing slightly. The motion of the wagon was rhythmic, almost soothing, and Daniel did not push for conversation. He seemed comfortable with silence in a way that most people were not. The ranch appeared as they crested a small rise. It was larger than Hannah had expected, a sprawling collection of buildings dominated by a 2-story house built from adobe and wood. There were several barns, corrals with horses, and what looked like a bunkhouse for ranch hands. Lights glowed in windows, promising warmth and life. "You run all this?" Hannah asked, unable to keep the surprise from her voice. "With help," Daniel said. "I have 6 hands who work full-time, and we hire more during roundup. It is not the biggest ranch in the territory, but it keeps us fed." He pulled the wagon up to the main house, and before Hannah could gather herself, the front door opened. A woman stepped out onto the porch, and Hannah felt herself relax another fraction. Mrs. Chen was exactly as Daniel had described her. A solid, capable-looking woman of about 50 with iron-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. She wore a simple dress and an apron, and her eyes were sharp as she took in Hannah's bedraggled appearance. "You found a stray," Mrs. Chen said, but her tone was not unkind. "Her name is Hannah Sutton," Daniel said, climbing down from the wagon. "She needs food, rest, and probably medical attention for her feet. Can you set her up in the blue room?" Mrs. Chen's expression softened slightly. "Come on, girl, let us get you inside before you fall over." Hannah accepted her help down from the wagon, wincing as her feet touched the ground. Mrs. Chen made a disapproving noise and called back to Daniel. "Her boots are in worse shape than I thought. I will burn them." "I will buy her new ones tomorrow," Daniel said. Inside, the house was clean and comfortable without being fancy. The furniture was sturdy and practical, the kind built to last. Mrs. Chen led Hannah upstairs to a room with blue curtains and a quilt-covered bed that looked impossibly soft. There was a pitcher of water and a basin on a dresser, and true to Daniel's word, the door had a solid lock. "You wash up as best you can," Mrs. Chen said. "I will bring you some clean clothes and bandages for those feet. Supper will be ready in 20 minutes, but if you would rather eat up here, I can bring you a tray." "Downstairs is fine," Hannah heard herself say. Mrs. Chen nodded approvingly. "Good. I do not hold with people hiding away unless they have a reason. You have nothing to fear in this house." After she left, Hannah stood in the middle of the room for a long moment, half convinced this was a dream or a trap or both. But the water in the pitcher was real and cool when she poured it into the basin. The cloth she used to wash her face and hands was rough but clean. And when she looked at herself in the small mirror above the dresser, she barely recognized the gaunt, haunted woman staring back at her. Mrs. Chen returned with a simple dress of dark blue cotton and clean undergarments. The dress was slightly too large, but it was whole and clean and did not have bloodstains. The housekeeper also brought bandages and a tin of salve that smelled of herbs. "Sit," she commanded, and Hannah sat. Mrs. Chen knelt with a grunt and began the process of cleaning and bandaging Hannah's ravaged feet. Her touch was efficient but gentle, and she did not comment on the scars and bruises that marked Hannah's legs. You have been through something, she said finally, but you do not have to talk about it if you do not want to. Just know that Daniel is a good man. He will not press you for anything you are not willing to give. Why does he care? Hannah asked. He does not know me. Mrs. Chen wrapped the last bandage and sat back on her heels. Daniel was 17 when he showed up in Valverde with nothing but the clothes on his back and a borrowed horse. His father had been a drunk who gambled away everything they had and then drank himself to death. His mother had died when he was a child. He worked odd jobs for 2 years, saved every penny, and bought a small piece of land that nobody else wanted. He built this ranch from nothing through hard work and determination, and he never forgot what it felt like to be young and alone and desperate. She stood, her knees popping. He helps people because people helped him. It is as simple as that. Now come downstairs and eat before the food gets cold. The dining room was simple but welcoming, with a long table that could seat 12 people. Daniel had cleaned up and changed his shirt. He stood when Hannah entered, pulling out a chair for her. The gesture was old-fashioned and courteous, and it made something in Hannah's chest tighten. The food was simple but abundant. Roasted chicken, beans, fresh bread, and vegetables that must have come from a garden somewhere on the property. Hannah tried to eat slowly to maintain some dignity, but her body had other ideas. She had not realized how hungry she was until the food was in front of her. Daniel and Mrs. Chen ate without comment, carrying on a quiet conversation about ranch business that did not require Hannah's participation. We lost 2 calves to coyotes last night, Mrs. Chen was saying. James said he saw tracks near the north pasture. I will ride out tomorrow and check on it, Daniel said. Then to Hannah, do you ride? Hannah nodded, swallowing a mouthful of bread. I grew up around horses. My father worked in mines, but he always kept a horse when he could afford it. Your father, Daniel said carefully. Is he the reason you are running? Hannah's hand tightened on her fork. My father is dead. He died in a mine collapse 6 weeks ago. I am sorry, Daniel said, and he sounded like he meant it. Me too? Hannah pushed food around on her plate. He was not a perfect man, but he was all I had. What happened after he died? Mrs. Chen asked. Hannah had not planned to tell them anything, but something about sitting at this table, eating this food, being treated like a human being instead of prey, loosened her tongue. The foreman at the mining camp decided I needed protection. His kind of protection. When I refused, he got angry. He cornered me in our cabin and tried to force himself on me. I fought him off with a broken bottle and ran. I do not know if he told people I attacked him unprovoked or if anyone even looked for me. I just ran. The room was very quiet. Daniel's jaw was tight and Mrs. Chen's eyes had gone hard. You did the right thing, Daniel said finally. If he comes looking for you here, he will regret it. I am not asking you to fight my battles, Hannah said quickly. I know you are not. But you are under my roof now, and that means something. Daniel met her eyes across the table. You said one night, I am not going to force you to stay longer, but if you want to stay, you are welcome here for as long as you need. What would I do? Hannah asked. I'm not a charity case. I have to earn my keep. Mrs. Chen made a considering noise. Can you cook? Some. Nothing fancy. Can you mend clothes, keep house, help in a garden? Yes to all 3. Then there is plenty of work to be done. I am not as young as I used to be, and this place is too much for one person to manage alone. If you are willing to work, we will give you room, board, and a small wage. When you have saved enough to move on or when you simply want to leave, you can do so with no hard feelings. Hannah looked between them, searching for the catch. There had to be a catch. People did not just offer kindness without expecting something in return. I sleep with my door locked, she said. Good, Daniel replied. You should. And if I decide to leave in the middle of the night, you will not try to stop me. I will not, though I would appreciate it if you would at least take some food and a decent pair of boots. And you are not going to expect anything from me. Nothing physical, nothing romantic, nothing that I'm not freely willing to give. Daniel's expression was very serious. "Hannah, I give you my word. I am offering you work and shelter, nothing more. What you do with that is entirely up to you." She studied his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, I will stay. For now." The relief that washed over her was almost dizzying. For the first time in weeks, she would sleep in a real bed with a locked door. She would wake up to breakfast instead of hunger. She would not have to run. After supper, Mrs. Chen showed her around the house, pointing out where things were kept, explaining the routines. The house was larger than it had seemed from outside, with several bedrooms upstairs, a parlor that looked rarely used, and a kitchen that was clearly the heart of the home. Everything was clean and well-maintained, speaking to Mrs. Chen's diligent care. "Daniel is usually up before dawn," Mrs. Chen explained. "He will have breakfast and then head out to work with the hands. He comes back for lunch, then works until supper. After that, he usually does paperwork in his office or sits on the porch. He is a creature of habit, which makes him easy to manage." "How long have you worked for him?" Hannah asked. 5 years. My husband and I came out here from California looking for a fresh start. He died of fever within 6 months. Daniel hired me as housekeeper when I was about to lose everything. He gave me a job, a home, and a reason to keep going. That is the kind of man he is." They ended the tour back at the Blue Room. Mrs. Chen patted Hannah's shoulder awkwardly. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will come soon enough." Alone in the room, Hannah locked the door and then stood with her back against it, half expecting someone to try to force their way in. But the house remained quiet. She could hear the muffled sounds of Daniel and Mrs. Chen moving around downstairs, then the creak of footsteps going to other parts of the house, then silence. The bed was as soft as it had looked. Hannah sank into it with a sigh that was almost a sob. Clean sheets. A pillow that did not smell of mildew and old wood. A mattress instead of a hard pew. She was asleep within minutes, and for the first time in weeks she did not dream of running. The next days fell into a rhythm that was both strange and comforting. Hannah woke each morning to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. She would dress in one of the simple dresses Mrs. Chen had found for her, clothes that had belonged to the housekeeper's sister and fit reasonably well with some adjustments. Then she would go downstairs to help prepare breakfast. Daniel was always up first, as Mrs. Chen had said. He would eat quickly, exchange a few words about the day's work, and then disappear until lunch. Hannah found herself watching for him, listening for the sound of his boots on the porch, in a way that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with curiosity. He was different from any man she had known. He was quiet but not cold, serious but capable of dry humor. He treated Mrs. Chen with respect that bordered on affection, and he spoke to his ranch hands as if they were partners rather than servants. When he came in for meals, he would ask Hannah questions about her day, about her thoughts on things, and he actually listened to her answers as if they mattered. On the 4th day, he kept his promise about new boots. He came back from town with a sturdy pair that fit her properly, along with several pairs of thick socks. He also brought fabric that Mrs. Chen exclaimed over, already planning new dresses for Hannah. "You did not have to do this," Hannah said, holding the boots. "Yes, I did," Daniel replied. "You cannot work properly if your feet hurt. It is practical, not charity." But it felt like more than practical. It felt like someone cared whether she was comfortable, whether she had what she needed. It had been so long since anyone had cared that Hannah had almost forgotten what it felt like. The work kept her busy. She helped Mrs. Chen with cooking and cleaning, learned to manage the vast garden that provided vegetables for the household, and spent hours mending clothes and linens. The physical labor was hard but satisfying, and she fell into bed each night pleasantly exhausted rather than wrung out with fear and desperation. She also began to learn about the ranch and the people who worked there. James was the foreman, a weathered man of about 40 who had worked for Daniel since the beginning. There was young Tommy, barely 18, who had been orphaned and given a job when he had nowhere else to go. There was Carlos and his brother Miguel, who had come up from Mexico looking for honest work and found it here. There was Samuel, a former slave who had made his way west after the war and discovered he had a gift for training horses. And there was Robert, quiet and efficient, who kept the books and managed supplies. Each of them treated Hannah with polite respect, but they gave her space. She suspected Daniel had made it clear that she was under his protection and that there would be consequences for anyone who made her uncomfortable. 2 weeks into her stay, Daniel asked if she would like to learn to ride properly. "I can ride," Hannah protested. "I am sure you can," Daniel said. "But have you ever ridden for pleasure instead of necessity?" She had not, and so she found herself in the corral the next morning, Daniel teaching her the finer points of horsemanship on a gentle mare named Rosie. He was a patient teacher, never condescending, always encouraging. And when Hannah finally managed to get Rosie to canter smoothly around the corral, Daniel's smile was bright and genuine. "You are a natural," he said. Hannah laughed, flushed with pleasure and exertion. "Hardly, but it is nice to ride without worrying about being chased." The words slipped out before she could stop them, and she saw Daniel's expression shift. "Are you still worried about that?" he asked quietly. "About being chased?" Hannah considered the question honestly. "Not as much as I was, but it is hard to believe that I am truly safe, even here. I keep waiting for something to go wrong." "That is understandable. Trust takes time to build, especially when it has been broken." Daniel stroked Rosie's neck absently. "But for what it is worth, I meant what I said. You are safe here. As long as you want to stay, this is your home." The word home lodged somewhere in Hannah's chest. She had not had a home in so long. Even before her father's death, they had moved from camp to camp, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. The closest thing she had to a home had been the churches where she slept, and those had been temporary sanctuaries at best. "Why do you care?" she asked. "You could have just left me in that church. You could have given me a meal and sent me on my way. Why did you bring me here? Why are you being so kind?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. "My mother died when I was 7, he said finally. "She got sick, and my father spent all our money on whiskey instead of doctors. After she was gone, he just got worse. He would gamble what little we had, lose it, and then come home drunk and angry. I learned to make myself scarce when he got like that. I would hide in barns, in sheds, anywhere I could find. And once, when I was about 12, I hid in a church." He paused, and Hannah waited, sensing there was more. "The preacher found me there in the morning. I was sure he would throw me out or drag me home to my father, but instead he gave me breakfast. He let me stay there for 3 days until my father sobered up enough to notice I was gone. That preacher probably saved my life. And when my father finally died and I was left with nothing, there were people in this town who helped me. They gave me work, taught me skills, lent me money to buy my first piece of land. I would not have survived without their kindness." He looked at Hannah directly, his gray-blue eyes intense. "You were sleeping in a church because it felt safe. I understand that need for sanctuary, and if I can provide that for you, if I can be the person who helps you the way others help me, then that is what I'm going to do. It is as simple as that." Hannah felt tears prick her eyes. It is not simple. Kindness is never simple. "Maybe not," Daniel agreed, "but it is necessary." They stood there in the corral, the morning sun warm on their faces, and something shifted between them. It was not attraction, not yet, but it was the beginning of something. A connection, an understanding, the tentative first threads of trust. As the weeks passed, those threads grew stronger. Hannah found herself seeking out Daniel's company, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She would bring him coffee while he worked on paperwork in his office, and they would talk about small things, books they had read, places they had been, dreams they had harbored. She learned that Daniel wanted to expand the ranch, that he hoped to breed horses as well as cattle, that he had a gift for seeing potential in land and animals and people. She also learned that he was lonely. Oh, he had Mrs. Chen and his ranch hands, and he was respected in Valverde, but there was a solitude to him, a sense that he had spent so long building this life that he had forgotten to build a life beyond work. "Have you ever thought about getting married?" Hannah asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. The question was bold, but they had grown comfortable enough with each other that bold questions did not seem out of place. Daniel was quiet for a moment, rocking slowly in his chair. "I have thought about it," he admitted, "but I have not met anyone who wanted to share this life. Ranching is hard work, and not everyone wants to live this far from town, this far from what passes for civilization out here." "You have not met anyone? Or you have not been looking?" His mouth quirked into a half smile. "Maybe a bit of both. What about you? You are young, smart, capable. You must have had suitors." Hannah laughed, but it was a bitter sound. "Suitors? That's a polite word for it. I have had men who wanted things from me, but none of them wanted me. There is a difference." "Yes," Daniel said quietly, "there is." They fell silent, but it was a comfortable silence. The sky was ablaze with color, oranges and pinks and purples bleeding together in a way that seemed impossible. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, and closer by, the horses nickered softly in their corral. "I am glad you stayed," Daniel said suddenly. "I know you said one night, but I'm glad you decided to stay longer." Hannah's heart did a strange little skip. "I am glad too," she admitted. And she was. For the first time since her father's death, she felt like she had a purpose beyond simple survival. She felt like she mattered. And slowly, carefully, she was beginning to feel like she was safe. But safety was a fragile thing, and it shattered on a hot afternoon in late August when a stranger rode up to the ranch. Hannah saw him from the kitchen window where she was helping Mrs. Chen prepare supper. He was a big man, thick through the shoulders, with a red face and mean eyes. Her blood turned to ice in her veins. "It is him," she whispered. Chen was beside her in an instant. "Who?" "The foreman from the mining camp. He found me." Mrs. Chen's expression hardened. She untied her apron and rolled up her sleeves. "Stay in the house, lock the doors. I will get Daniel." "No," Hannah said, panic rising in her throat. "I will just leave. I will run. He does not have to know I was here." "You will do no such thing. You are not running anymore." Mrs. Chen's voice was firm. "Daniel will handle this. Trust him." She was out the door before Hannah could protest. Through the window, Hannah watched as Mrs. Chen intercepted the stranger before he could reach the house. They spoke, and even from a distance, Hannah could see the man's body language turn aggressive. Then Mrs. Chen pointed toward the barn where Daniel was working. Hannah could not hear what was said when the foreman confronted Daniel. She could only watch as the two men faced off in the dusty yard. The foreman was bigger than Daniel, heavier, but Daniel stood his ground. He said something, and the foreman's face turned even redder. His hand moved toward his gun. Hannah's heart stopped. She was moving before she realized it, running out of the house, screaming, "No!" Both men turned to look at her. The foreman's face split into an ugly smile. "There you are, you little whore. Thought you could run from me?" "Leave," Daniel said, his voice hard as iron. "You are not welcome on my land." "That bitch stole from me," the foreman spat. "Cut me with a bottle and ran off with money that was not hers. I am taking her back to face charges." "That is a lie," Hannah shouted. "You tried to force yourself on me." "Your word against mine, darling. And who do you think people will believe?" "I believe her," Daniel said. His hand rested casually near his own gun. "And I am telling you one more time to leave. If you make me tell you a third time, I will make you leave." The foreman laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think you're some kind of hero? She is just a used-up tramp. She was probably begging for it." Daniel moved so fast that Hannah barely saw it. His fist connected with the foreman's jaw with a crack that echoed across the yard. The bigger man staggered back, cursing, and his hand went to his gun. But Daniel was faster. His revolver was out and aimed at the foreman's chest before the other man could clear leather. "Draw that gun and I will put a bullet in you," Daniel said, his voice deadly calm. "I have 6 witnesses who will say you went for your weapon first and I acted in self-defense. You think about whether this is really worth dying over." The foreman's hand froze. Around them, the ranch hands had emerged from various buildings, all of them armed, all of them watching with hard eyes. Samuel had his rifle, James had his pistol, even young Tommy had a shotgun that looked almost too big for him to handle. "You are making a mistake," the foreman said, but he lowered his hand away from his gun. "The only mistake would be you not riding away right now," Daniel replied. "And if I ever see you on my land again, if I ever hear that you have bothered Hannah again, I will hunt you down and make sure you regret it. Do we understand each other?" For a moment, Hannah thought the foreman might try something. She saw the calculation in his eyes, the weighing of pride against survival. But Daniel's gun did not waver, and the foreman was outnumbered 6-1. "She is not worth it anyway," the foreman muttered. He spat in the dust, climbed back on his horse, and rode away, throwing curses over his shoulder. Daniel did not lower his gun until the foreman was out of sight. Then he holstered the weapon and turned to Hannah. She was shaking, she realized. Her whole body was trembling like a leaf in a storm. "It is over," Daniel said gently. "He is gone." "He will come back," Hannah whispered. "Men like that always come back." "Then I will deal with him again." Daniel stepped closer, and Hannah did not flinch away. "But I do not think he will. He is a bully, and bullies fold when someone stands up to them." "You could have been shot. You could have been killed." Hannah's voice broke on the last word. "Why would you risk that for me?" "Because you are worth risking it for?" Daniel said it simply, as if it were obvious, as if it were not the most extraordinary thing anyone had ever said to her. Hannah felt the tears come then, hot and fast and impossible to stop. All the fear and pain and exhaustion of the past months poured out of her in great heaving sobs. And then Daniel's arms were around her, strong and steady, and she was crying into his chest while he held her and told her it was all right. She was safe. He had her. She could let it out. Mrs. Chen was there too, her hand rubbing circles on Hannah's back, murmuring soothing words. The ranch hands had discreetly disappeared back to their work, giving her privacy in her breakdown. When the tears finally subsided, Hannah pulled back, mortified. "I'm sorry, I got your shirt all wet." "I have other shirts." Daniel's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb wiping away a remaining tear. "Hannah, you do not have to apologize for feeling things. You have been through trauma. You are allowed to fall apart sometimes." "I do not want to be weak," she said. "Crying is not weakness. It takes courage to let yourself be vulnerable." His eyes searched hers. "You are one of the strongest people I have ever met. You survived when many people would have given up. You kept going when every instinct probably told you to quit. That is not weakness. That is strength." Hannah felt something crack open inside her chest, something that had been locked tight for so long she had forgotten it was there. It was not just gratitude she felt for this man. It was not just relief or comfort. It was something deeper, something that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. She cared about him. She cared about Daniel Ashford in a way that went beyond appreciation for his kindness. She cared about his quiet strength, his dry humor, the way he looked at her like she mattered. She cared about the gentleness in his rough hands and the vulnerability hidden behind his steady gaze. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for standing up for me, for believing me." "Always," Daniel said, and it sounded like a promise. That night, Hannah lay in her bed, with the door locked out of habit more than fear. She stared at the ceiling and thought about what it would mean to stay here permanently, to make this ranch her home not just as an employee but as something more. The thought both excited and frightened her. She had not been looking for love. She had been looking for sanctuary, but somehow the two had become intertwined. The weeks that followed were different, charged with an awareness that had not been there before. Hannah caught Daniel watching her sometimes, his expression unguarded, and when their eyes met, neither of them looked away. She found herself seeking out reasons to be near him, to work alongside him, to hear his voice and his laugh. Mrs. Chen noticed, of course. Nothing escaped her sharp eyes. "You could do worse," she said one morning as they kneaded bread together. "He is a good man." "I know he is," Hannah said, but I am terrified." Hannah pushed her hands into the dough with more force than necessary. "What if I am wrong? What if he does not feel the same way? What if I am just seeing what I want to see because I am so grateful for his help?" "You are not wrong," Mrs. Chen said firmly. "That boy looks at you like you hung the moon. He has looked at you like that almost since the beginning, though I do not think he knew it himself at first, and you look at him the same way." "I do not know how to do this," Hannah admitted. "I do not know how to be in love. I do not know how to trust someone with my heart when I have barely learned to trust them with my safety." "Love is not something you figure out before you feel it. It is something you figure out as you go." Mrs. Chen patted her hand, leaving a dusting of flour. "And for what it is worth, I think you two are good for each other. He has been alone too long and you have been running too long. Maybe it is time for both of you to stop and build something together." That evening, Daniel asked Hannah to ride out with him to check on the north pasture. She agreed, and they saddled up as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. The ride was peaceful, the horses moving at an easy pace through land that was becoming familiar to Hannah. When they reached the pasture, Daniel dismounted and helped Hannah down, his hands steady on her waist. They walked to a spot overlooking a small creek, where cottonwood trees provided shade and the sound of running water was soothing. "I wanted to talk to you," Daniel said. "Away from the house, away from everyone else." Hannah's heart began to beat faster. "All right." He took off his hat and ran a hand through his hair. A gesture she had learned meant he was nervous. "I have been thinking a lot since that day the foreman came. About you, about me, about what this is between us." "What is it?" Hannah asked quietly. "I do not know exactly, but I know that when he threatened you, I was ready to kill him without hesitation. I know that I look forward to every meal because it means I get to see you. I know that when I'm out working, I find myself thinking about what you might be doing, whether you are smiling, whether you are happy." He met her eyes. "I know that somewhere along the way, you stopped being a woman I was helping and became someone I cannot imagine my life without." Hannah's breath caught in her throat. "Daniel." "I am not good with words," he continued. "I am better with actions, but I need to say this. I have feelings for you, Hannah, real feelings, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise, but I also want you to know that there is no pressure. You do not owe me anything. If you want to stay here as my employee and nothing more, that is fine. If you want to leave, I will help you do that. Whatever you need, whatever you want, I will respect it." Hannah stepped closer to him, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "What if what I want is you?" His eyes widened slightly. "Do you?" "I think I started wanting you the day you found me in that church," Hannah said, "but I was too scared to admit it even to myself. I have spent so long being afraid of men, being wary of their intentions, that I did not know how to recognize genuine care when I saw it. But you have been patient with me. You have given me time to heal, space to find myself again. And in doing that, you have shown me what a good man looks like, what love could look like if I am brave enough to reach for it." "You are the bravest person I know," Daniel said, his voice rough with emotion. "Then I am brave enough for this." Hannah reached up and touched his face, feeling the rough stubble under her fingers. "I am not running anymore, Daniel. I do not want to run. I want to stay here with you and build something real." He kissed her then, and it was nothing like the rough, forceful advances she had fended off from other men. It was gentle and questioning, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But Hannah did not pull away. She leaned into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, kissing him back with all the pent-up longing and hope that had been building in her chest for weeks. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. Daniel rested his forehead against hers. "My home will feel safer," he said. "That is what I told you that first day. I meant it then, but I mean it even more now. This is your home, Hannah, for as long as you want it. And if you will have me, I would like to spend the rest of my life making sure you feel safe and loved and valued." "Is that a proposal?" Hannah asked, half laughing, half crying. "Not yet. I do not want to rush you." Daniel pulled back enough to look at her properly. "But it is a promise that I am in this for the long haul if you are." "I am," Hannah said without hesitation. "I am in this, Daniel, completely." They stayed by the creek as the sun set, talking about everything and nothing, making plans for a future that no longer seemed impossible. They talked about expanding the ranch, about the life they could build together, about the possibility of a family someday when Hannah felt ready for that step. When they rode back to the ranch under a sky full of stars, Hannah felt lighter than she had in months. The fear that had been her constant companion was not gone entirely, but it was diminished. In its place was hope, bright and warm and sustaining. Mrs. Chen took one look at them when they returned and smiled knowingly. "About time," was all she said, but her eyes were pleased. Over the next months, Hannah and Daniel's relationship deepened and grew. They worked side by side during the day, planning improvements to the ranch, discussing the future of the herd, debating the merits of different breeds of horses. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch and talk, or read aloud to each other, or simply enjoy the comfortable silence that came from being with someone who understood you. Daniel taught Hannah to shoot, insisting that she should be able to defend herself. She turned out to be a natural shot, much to everyone's surprise. He also taught her about ranching, about the business side of things, treating her as a partner rather than just a helper. Hannah, for her part, brought warmth and life to the ranch that had been missing. She organized social gatherings with neighboring ranches, strengthening Daniel's ties to the community. She started a small garden that grew into a large one, providing enough vegetables to feed the household and sell in town. She also began teaching young Tommy to read, discovering a gift for teaching that she had not known she possessed. The ranch hands accepted her as Daniel's chosen partner without question. James even joked that the ranch had run better since she arrived, earning a swat from Mrs. Chen but agreement from the others. In December, Daniel asked her officially to marry him. He did it on a crisp evening when the first snow was falling, kneeling in front of the fireplace with a simple gold band that had belonged to his mother. "I know I said I would not rush you," he said, his voice shaking slightly, "but I cannot imagine spending another day without knowing that you are mine and I am yours. Hannah Sutton, will you marry me?" Hannah did not hesitate. Yes, 1,000 times yes. They were married in the church where Daniel had first found her, in a simple ceremony attended by Mrs. Chen, the ranch hands, and a few friends from town. Pastor Williams, who had been understanding and kind when Daniel explained the significance of the location, performed the service with warmth and grace. Hannah wore a dress of cream-colored silk that Mrs. Chen had helped her make, and she carried wildflowers that Samuel had picked that morning. Daniel wore his best suit, his hair neatly combed, his eyes bright with joy as he watched her walk down the aisle. When Pastor Williams pronounced them husband and wife, Daniel kissed her with such tenderness that Hannah felt tears slip down her cheeks. This was home, she thought. Not the building, not the place, but this man who had seen her at her lowest and offered her not just safety, but love. The reception was held at the ranch with food that Mrs. Chen and Hannah had spent days preparing. There was music and dancing and laughter that lasted long into the night. Even James, who was usually so serious, danced with Mrs. Chen and smiled until his face must have hurt. That night, when they were finally alone in the bedroom they would now share, Daniel was patient and gentle, making sure Hannah felt safe and cherished every moment. And when she cried afterward, he held her and understood that these were tears of healing, of release, of joy at finally being able to give herself to someone without fear. "I love you," Hannah whispered in the darkness. "I love you so much it scares me." "I love you too," Daniel replied, kissing her forehead. "And you do not have to be scared anymore. I am not going anywhere, and neither are you. We are home." The first years of their marriage were not without challenges. The ranch faced a hard winter that killed several head of cattle. There was a dry summer that nearly destroyed the crops. Hannah had a miscarriage in their second year that devastated them both. But through all of it, they faced the difficulties together, drawing strength from each other. When Hannah became pregnant again, they were cautiously hopeful. Daniel became almost comically overprotective, insisting she rest more, worrying over every twinge and discomfort. Mrs. Chen took it upon herself to monitor both of them, making sure Daniel did not drive Hannah crazy with his concern, and that Hannah did not overwork herself out of stubbornness. Their son was born on a warm May morning in 1881, with Mrs. Chen acting as midwife and Daniel pacing a hole in the floor downstairs. When Mrs. Chen finally brought him up to meet his son, Daniel's hands shook as he held the tiny bundle. "He is perfect," Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. "He has your eyes," Hannah said from the bed, exhausted but radiant. They named him Matthew, after Daniel's grandfather, who had been the one good influence in his father's family. Matthew was a healthy, happy baby who seemed to bring even more joy to the ranch. The hands took turns trying to make him smile, and Mrs. Chen knitted enough blankets and booties to outfit 10 children. 2 years later, a daughter joined them, a tiny girl with Hannah's green eyes and Daniel's dark hair. They named her Catherine, and she was as strong-willed as her mother and as gentle as her father. As the children grew, the ranch prospered. Daniel's dream of breeding horses became a reality, and the Ashford Ranch became known throughout Texas for producing quality horses. Hannah managed the business side of things, proving to have a sharp mind for numbers and negotiations. Together, they built something that neither of them could have built alone. On a warm evening in 1889, Hannah stood on the porch watching Daniel teach Matthew and Catherine how to rope fence posts. Matthew was 8 now, serious and thoughtful like his father. Catherine was 6, all wild energy and laughter. A third child, a son they had named Thomas after the young ranch hand who had become like a brother to Daniel, played at her feet. He was barely 2, still toddling around on unsteady legs. Mrs. Chen came out to join her, moving more slowly now, but still sharp as ever. "You have a good life," she said. "I do," Hannah agreed. "Better than I ever dreamed possible." "Do you ever think about that day in the church? About who you were then?" Hannah considered the question. "Sometimes. It feels like another lifetime. That girl who was so scared, so alone, who thought the best she could hope for was a safe place to sleep. She had no idea what was waiting for her." "Daniel gave you safety," Mrs. Chen said, "but you gave him purpose. You made him understand that he was not just building a ranch, but a home. You both saved each other in different ways." Hannah thought about this. Mrs. Chen was right. Daniel had saved her life, had given her shelter when she needed it most. But she had saved him too from a life of loneliness, from the isolation of a man who worked so hard building something that he forgot to live in it. Daniel looked up and caught her watching him. He smiled, that rare, bright smile that still made her heart skip, and waved. Hannah waved back, her chest full of love and gratitude and bone-deep contentment. That night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Hannah and Daniel sat on the porch as they had so many times over the years. The stars were bright overhead, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mate. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day?" Hannah asked, her head resting on Daniel's shoulder. "In the church?" "I said a lot of things," Daniel replied, his arm around her waist. "You said my home would feel safer." "Your home? You meant this ranch." "I did. You were right." Hannah lifted her head to look at him. "This is the safest place I've ever known. Not because of the walls or the locks on the doors, but because of you. Because you made me understand that safety is not just about protection from harm. It is about being known and loved and accepted. It is about having someone who sees you at your worst and chooses to stay anyway." Daniel's eyes were suspiciously bright. "You did the same for me. I spent so long building this place, making it successful, proving that I was worth something. But I was still that scared kid hiding in a church, still that orphan who had to fight for every scrap. You made me see that I did not have to fight anymore, that I could rest, that I was enough just as I was. They kissed long and slow and sweet, a kiss that spoke of years together and years still to come. When they pulled apart, they stayed close, foreheads touching, breathing the same air. I used to sleep in churches because they felt safe, Hannah whispered. But the truth is, you are my sanctuary. Wherever you are, that is where I am home. And you are mine, Daniel replied, always. Years continued to pass, marked by the growth of their children, the expansion of the ranch, and the deepening of their love. Matthew grew into a young man who combined his father's work ethic with his mother's sharp mind. He went to college back east, studying business and agriculture, and returned to help modernize the ranch. Catherine proved to have a gift with horses that exceeded even her father's, and she began breeding a new line that became sought after throughout the Southwest. Thomas followed in his father's footsteps more directly, learning every aspect of ranching and eventually taking over the day-to-day operations. Hannah and Daniel watched their children grow with pride and occasional heartache. There were the inevitable teenage rebellions, the first loves and first heartbreaks, the arguments about the future and the past. But through it all, the family remained strong, bound by the love and commitment that Hannah and Daniel had built their marriage on. Mrs. Chen passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1895, surrounded by the family she had helped hold together. Her death hit them all hard, but especially Hannah, who had come to see the older woman as the mother she had never really had. They buried her on a hill overlooking the ranch with a simple stone that read Margaret Chen. She made this house a home. In the late 1890s, when modern conveniences began to reach even remote ranches in Texas, Hannah and Daniel made improvements to the house. They added indoor plumbing, electricity, and a telephone line. The children teased them about becoming soft in their old age, but the truth was that Daniel wanted to make Hannah's life as comfortable as possible. She had worked hard for so many years, and he wanted her to have every comfort he could provide. They also finally took a honeymoon of sorts, traveling to California to see the ocean. Hannah had never seen the sea, and when she stood on the beach with the waves crashing at her feet and the salt spray on her face, she wept with the beauty of it. Daniel stood beside her, holding her hand, and they both marveled at how far they had come from the desperate young woman in a church and the lonely rancher who had found her there. As they grew older, they spent more time on the porch, watching the ranch they had built continue without them at the center of it. Matthew had married a smart young woman from Val Verde who managed the ranch books with an efficiency that made Hannah proud. Catherine had married one of the neighboring rancher's sons, a kind man who supported her passion for horses. Thomas was courting a teacher from town, and they all expected an engagement any day. On a particularly beautiful evening in 1902, Hannah was sitting on the porch when Daniel came out with 2 cups of coffee. They were both in their 40s now, grayed and weathered, but still strong. Daniel had a few more lines around his eyes, and Hannah's hands showed the work of a lifetime. But when they looked at each other, they still saw the young people who had fallen in love 24 years earlier. "Do you have any regrets?" Daniel asked, settling into his chair. Hannah thought about the question seriously. She thought about the hard years, the losses, the struggles. She thought about the baby she had lost, about Mrs. Chen's death, about all the small and large heartbreaks that life had dealt them. "No," she said finally, "I would not change anything. Every hardship led us here, to this moment, to this life, and this life is more than I ever dared to dream." "Not even running into me in that church?" Daniel asked with a smile. "Especially not that." Hannah reached over and took his hand. "You saved me, Daniel. In every way a person can be saved. You gave me safety when I needed it, love when I was ready for it, and partnership when I was strong enough for it. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. You gave me everything." "You gave me just as much," Daniel said. "More, even. I had a ranch, but you made it a home. I had success, but you made it meaningful. I had a life, but you made it worth living." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set. painting the sky in brilliant colors. In the distance, they could hear their grandchildren playing, the sound of young Thomas's children laughing and shrieking as they chased each other around the yard. It was a sound of life, of continuity, of legacy. "Do you ever think about that foreman?" Daniel asked suddenly. "The one who came looking for you?" "Rarely," Hannah admitted. "I heard years ago that he died in a bar fight somewhere up in Colorado. But even when I do think about him, he has no power over me anymore. He was just a man, and not even a particularly good one. What he tried to do to me was terrible, but it also led me here. So in a strange way, I suppose I should thank him." "Do not give him that credit," Daniel said firmly. "You saved yourself. You were the one who ran, who survived, who had the courage to accept help when it was offered. He was just the catalyst. You were the hero of your own story." Hannah squeezed his hand. "We were both heroes, and we were both saved. That is what makes it a good story." As the years continued to pass, Hannah and Daniel eased more into retirement. They traveled a bit, visiting their children and growing number of grandchildren. They sat on various boards in Val Verde, helping to guide the town's growth and supporting the church that had brought them together. They donated money to build a shelter for people passing through town who needed a safe place to stay, ensuring that no one would have to sleep on a hard church pew if they did not want to. In 1908, the town of Val Verde held a celebration for Daniel and Hannah's 30th wedding anniversary. The whole community turned out, and the ranch hands past and present came to pay their respects to the couple who had built not just a successful ranch, but a legacy of kindness and hard work. James, now retired but still sharp, gave a speech about how Daniel had taken a chance on him when no one else would. Samuel, whose sons now worked on the ranch, talked about how Daniel and Hannah had welcomed him without judgment in a time when that was rare. Tommy, who had gone on to start his own small ranch with Daniel's help, spoke about how they had given him a family when he had none. Person after person stood up and told stories of Daniel and Hannah's generosity, their kindness, their willingness to help anyone who needed it. Hannah sat and listened, her hand in Daniel's, and thought about the strange and beautiful path that had led her from that desperate flight across the territories to this moment of being celebrated by a community that had become her family. When it was Daniel's turn to speak, he stood slowly and looked around at the assembled crowd. "I am not good with speeches," he said to knowing laughter, "but I want to say this. 30 years ago, I found a young woman sleeping in a church because it was the only place she felt safe. I brought her to my ranch and told her it would feel safer. I had no idea that she would make it feel like a home, not just for me, but for everyone who passed through its gates. Hannah is the heart of this ranch and the heart of our family. Everything good that has come from our lives together is because of her strength, her love, and her willingness to take a chance on a lonely rancher who barely knew how to talk to people." He turned to Hannah, his eyes bright with tears he was not ashamed to show. "You are my sanctuary, my home, my heart. Thank you for 30 years of teaching me what love really means." The crowd erupted in applause, but Hannah barely heard it. She was looking at Daniel, at this man who had seen her at her lowest and offered her not just help but a future. She stood and kissed him, right there in front of everyone, and did not care who saw. They held a dance after the dinner, and Daniel and Hannah danced together as they had on their wedding day, moving slowly across the floor while their children and grandchildren watched with smiles. The music was sweet, and Hannah felt young again, felt like that girl who had been so afraid to hope for anything good. "What are you thinking?" Daniel asked, his hand warm on her back. "I am thinking that I slept in churches because they felt safe," Hannah said. "But the real sanctuary was you. The real safety was the home we built together. And I would do it all again, every hard moment, every struggle, just to end up here with you." "I would do the same," Daniel said. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me." They danced until the music stopped, and then they danced to the sound of their grandchildren laughing, and then they swayed together in silence simply because they could. This was love, Hannah thought. Not the dramatic declarations or the grand gestures, though those had their place. Real love was this: 3 decades of choosing each other every day, of building something together, of being home for each other no matter what storms came. As they grew into their 60s and then 70s, Daniel and Hannah's love only deepened. They had the kind of relationship that young people envied, the kind that proved love was not just for the young. They would sit on the porch for hours, holding hands and watching the world go by, content in each other's presence. Daniel's health began to fail in his early 70s, his heart not as strong as it had once been. The doctors told Hannah to prepare herself, but she refused to believe that death would take him from her. They had fought too hard, built too much, loved too deeply for it to end. But Daniel knew his time was coming, and on a clear spring morning in 1920, he called Hannah to their room. She knew immediately that this was goodbye. "Do not," she said, tears already streaming down her face, "just do not say it." "I have to," Daniel said. His voice was weak, but his eyes were clear. "Hannah, you gave me a lifetime of joy. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. You made me believe in goodness when I had almost forgotten it existed. I love you more than words can say, and I always will." "I love you too," Hannah sobbed. "I do not know how to do this without you." "You will figure it out," Daniel said. "You are the strongest person I know. You will be sad, and that is okay. But you will also be all right because you have our children and grandchildren, and you have the home we built. That will sustain you." He died that afternoon with Hannah holding his hand and their children gathered around the bed. It was peaceful as death could be, but it tore Hannah's heart to pieces. The funeral was the largest Val Verde had ever seen. People came from all over Texas to pay their respects to Daniel Ashford, the rancher who had built an empire on kindness and hard work. They buried him next to Mrs. Chen on the hill overlooking the ranch, with a stone that read Daniel Ashford. He made this place a home. Hannah grieved deeply, but she did not break. She had Daniel's strength in her, all those years of his love and support woven into her very being. She continued to live on the ranch, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, finding comfort in the legacy they had built together. She lived another 15 years after Daniel's death, dying peacefully in her sleep at the age of 86. Her children found her in the morning, lying in the bed she had shared with Daniel for 42 years, a slight smile on her face as if she had seen something beautiful in her dreams. They buried her next to Daniel, of course, and the stone they placed read simply, "Hannah Ashford, she found home." On the day of her funeral, the youngest of Hannah's great-grandchildren asked their grandmother Catherine why everyone was so sad. Catherine knelt down and smiled through her tears. "Because we loved her very much, and we will miss her. But we are also happy because she is with your great-grandfather now. He gave her a home when she needed one most, and she made that home a place of love and joy. They built something beautiful together, and that beauty lives on in all of us." The child seemed to think about this. So they had a happy ending. Catherine looked out at the ranch, at the house Hannah and Daniel had built, at the children and grandchildren who carried their legacy forward. She thought about the story of a desperate young woman and a lonely rancher who had found each other in a church and built a love that lasted a lifetime. Yes, she said, they had the happiest ending of all. And it was true because Hannah Sutton, who had once slept in churches because they felt safe, had found something safer and truer than any building could provide. She had found home in Daniel Ashford's arms, and together they had built a sanctuary not just for themselves but for everyone who came after them. Their love had been tested by hardship and struggle, but it had endured, growing stronger with each passing year. The ranch continued for generations, each one adding to the legacy that Hannah and Daniel had started, but they all knew the story, passed down from parent to child, of how it all began. How a cowboy had found a woman in a church and told her his home would feel safer. How he had been right. how love had saved them both and created something that would last far beyond their lifetimes. It was a story of hope and healing, of trust rebuilt and love discovered. It was a story of two people who had every reason to give up but chose instead to fight for something better. It was in every way a story of home, and it proved that sometimes the safest place in the world is in the arms of someone who loves you truly and completely, without reservation or condition. Hannah and Daniel had found that safety in each other, and in doing so, they had created a legacy that would never fade, a love that would echo through the generations, reminding everyone who heard their story that home is not a place but a person, and sanctuary is found not in walls but in the courage to open your heart to someone worthy of holding it.